Hi folks, welcome back, or I should say welcome back to myself. I really want to thank you all for your patience and for still subscribing to my channel, because it's been a week or so since I've posted. It might be the energy of the time, or it might just be, it's been curious, you know, there was a certain amount of momentum and I felt like there were videos I was doing day after day and there was a lot to say. And then at a certain point, when it felt like information that needed to be shared at that time had been shared, I thought I would take a few days off, but I didn't anticipate that I would take all this time off. And for the past couple of days, there have been videos that I've wanted to do and get back into the swing of things, but as is typical of this time, we have a new moon in maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours time, a little over 2 hours time. It's at 7:27 p.m. Pacific time today, on the 22nd of April, on Wednesday. So as is typical of the days before a new moon, you know, it's great to wrap things up and get certain things done, but it's you don't always get the things on your to-do list checked off. And then this afternoon, I knew I had to finally do a video, and it's taken me all afternoon and into the evening to get something out, which again is not atypical, because frankly, energetically, all I want to do is either rest or relax or put my feet up or listen to music or check out in some way and purge this last lunar cycle. Well, the new moon is in the sign of Taurus, and more on that in a second. There are going to be a couple of videos. There's going to be this one I'm going to do on the new moon, and then the next video I'm going to do is going to be on Uranus and Taurus, which is around for another 6 or 7 years. But the new moon, of course, occurs today and inaugurates a new lunar cycle. But today's video, I'm going to keep specific to the new moon in a more personal sense and universal only insofar as we'll talk about the pandemic briefly in terms of the lunation and what it's trying to tell us about that. So both on a personal level and a pandemic level. And then the video I do in the next couple of days on Uranus and Taurus will be relevant to this new moon, because this new moon is conjunct Uranus. It's about 3 degrees away from Uranus. So certainly, you know, you can't ignore that conjunction with this particular new moon. And those of you who've been following this channel know that the last few new moons, as I've been trying to pay attention to the conjunctions and the rulerships, they've been illuminating in terms of the information that we've been getting with regard to whatever may be happening in our own lives or the pandemic in general. But let's do a recap of where it is that we are coming from. The last new moon was in the sign of Aries, a sign that the moon is not necessarily comfortable with, and it was conjunct Chiron, which is a body. I will not call it a dwarf planet or an asteroid or a comet. Let's just call it an astrological body that is associated with healing wounds. And as we had discussed at that time, and prior to that, we had Mercury retrograde and Mercury going direct. And the lunations while Mercury was retrograde and with Mercury stationary, whether it was the new moon with Mercury retrograde or the full moon with Mercury stationary, certainly seemed to inform, certainly seemed to launch, certainly seemed to, when the Mercury was retrograde, certainly that started the quarantining process, especially in Europe, especially in Italy. And there was a lot of information, and the information was confusing and we couldn't make sense of it. And the full moon with Mercury stationary around March the 8th, that followed that new moon 2 weeks prior. So we're going back to the end of February, which makes sense in the way the pandemic started to make its presence known to us consciousness-wise in greater and greater intensity. That particular full moon with Mercury stationary certainly inaugurated its own kind of everything on pause, shelter in place became wider. And as Mercury started to go direct after March the 10th, the information we started to get, maybe in our own lives and in general, was clearer, was cleaner. We could do something with that information. Whereas with the information in February and the beginning of March, it was not something that we could hang our hats on. Now, with this last lunation at the end of March, March the 23rd in Aries, the new moon being conjunct Chiron, healing wounds, there were 2 things that I had said at that time. One was, now it was in the sign of Aries, so wherever Aries is in your chart, whatever house it occupies and whatever that house stands for, could have certainly been highlighted for the past month in some ways. And the full moon in Libra 2 weeks after that, or 2 weeks ago, you would look to where Libra sits in your chart and the house it occupies and what it stands for and what has been illuminated to some extent over the past couple of weeks, but especially that week after the full moon. But with this new moon in Aries, we talked about the fact that whatever healing is to be introduced gets introduced in this lunation cycle, whether it is on a personal level, wherever it is that this new moon occurs in your chart and whatever house that is in and whatever it stands for, and on a collective level. So it may be that as time goes on and we start to see tests that are made available or solutions that are made available, that we are able to trace them back to their origin during this time on a collective or a global level. Would be interesting to see. But the process with Chiron always involves the healing comes from sitting in the wound and examining it and being in it and understanding various triggers. And, you know, God knows, I mean, should we count the wounds that we have all felt and have been experiencing over the past 28 days? I mean, how much more sitting in wounds do we really need to do? I think we're losing patience with the process to some extent. And this idea of losing patience is really interesting given the fact that this new moon in a few hours is conjunct Uranus, not a planet known for its patience. Irrespective, I want to honor this last lunation and this last lunar cycle for the discomfort, irritation, anger, desire for change, reacquaintance, or certainly unwelcome perhaps, but necessary exposure to where it is that we are hurting. And with that exposure really giving us a sense of an experience of pain, whether it is individual, wherever Aries sits in your chart, or collective, and therefore creating the discomfort. And the moon in Aries will do that. Creating the discomfort, creating the irritation, creating the impetus to create a change and to find a healing solution or healing solutions. Now, whether this means that as the weeks go on, tests are made available a little more widely and there's a more comfortable litmus with regard to who is allowed to go back into the workforce and who still needs to stay quarantined and all, you know, my hope is that that becomes more and more present. I don't know if you were to pin me down, I don't know that we would have a shelter in place for the rest of this year. The Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, that certainly seems to be part of this pandemic. You know, these conjunctions are with us till December, but the question is, how do they shift around and how do they make way for us to gradually go back into the workforce? And I think that, you know, this particular lunation in Taurus with Uranus, as the next 4 weeks move forward, I think we're going to get greater clarity on that. I don't know that we're waiting till December to do that. I think that greater clarity will appear in the next 4 weeks. With this lunation now behind us and initiating whatever it is that is initiated, the other thing I just want to say with Jupiter and Pluto and Saturn involved, but particularly with the Jupiter-Pluto transits that are involved this year, and it's not difficult to see why this word came up for me as I was thinking about this new moon. You know, Uranus is a liberator planet, and gosh, let me see if I you know, I'm going to let that thing shine, or at least see if I can move the camera so well, there's a ray of light on my head. What are you going to do about it? Sorry about the irritation and the discomfort with that, but I'm going to let it be. I didn't notice that when it started to come in. Irrespective. So with Uranus, with Jupiter and Pluto, the theme of revolution, or really a significant change, a significant new beginning. A significant change, a significant new beginning is in the offing by the end of this year. I'm not going to make a political prediction because, as I've mentioned on this channel before, it's not as if the current US president's chart isn't strong or getting stronger. So it remains to be seen how this year plays out. There are certainly months to watch out for in terms of vulnerability in June, July, and August and maybe even into September. But it's not as though the chart isn't gaining a certain amount of momentum of a certain kind. So irrespective, there's a certain amount of the sitting in the wound and examining it and really kind of feeling the pain on various levels, and whether you're pro or anti whatever, everyone is feeling some sort of a pain or some sort of a call to arms or some sort of a revolutionary epiphany sort of quality to it. I would say that because this last lunation was conjunct Chiron, the theme of healing mentally, emotionally with Chiron, and physically, it certainly was a lunation that, even though it didn't feel like that's what it was about, it is what it was about. Now, let's move on to this particular new moon. I've spent 10 minutes on the last one and setting the stage for this one. Let's talk about this new moon in a couple of hours' time, conjunct Uranus and Taurus. The moon is happier in Taurus. It's a stabilizing new moon. It's a stable new moon. But it's conjunct. It's a slow and steady wins the race new moon, because Taurus is a slow and steady wins the race sign. It's a tortoise, not a hare, turtle, not a hare new moon. It is a go with the flow, understand the flow of nature, understand the flow of abundance, understand how things come to you and how things grow and reach fruition in their own time sign. It is a sign of conservation. It is a sign of appreciation. It is a sign of abundance. It is a sign of gratitude. It is a sign of enjoyment. It is a sign of luxury, but it is also a sign of practical and earthy conservation and maintenance. And wherever you look, the fact that this new moon is happening on Earth Day, Taurus is the sign that, out of all the signs, is most associated with Gaia, Earth. And, in contemporary astrology, it's an open question whether Venus rules Taurus or Gaia rules Taurus. And certainly a case can be made that Gaia rules Taurus. We're so eager to just make sure that one planet rules one sign, and not really thrilled about the fact that there are different planets, Mars and Venus and Jupiter and Saturn ruling two different signs, irrespective of it's a diversion there. So you have this new moon in this kind of slow and steady wins the race sign, this conservation sign, but it's next to Uranus. And Uranus is, I was reading, I do my new moon videos relatively late, and so things come through my own news feeds, and someone referred to Uranus as a game changer planet, and I thought, that there's something to that. I think of Uranus as a liberator. Some people use the word awakener. For me, it's about epiphanies and liberation and authenticity. The epiphanies are the most singular, are the most experiential. Epiphanies is the first word that comes to mind with Uranus. It's those things. It's like when you're looking at a puzzle and you're trying to solve it, and does it come to you, and you have that eureka moment, or that aha moment, or that Einstein moment. It's about taking our mental processes of processing things and taking them to a quantum leap of understanding something. And there are two planets that I associate with intuition, Uranus and Neptune. With Neptune, it's much more inspiration. It's much more musical. It's much more muses. It's much more you sit and it comes from this cloudy place. Whereas with Uranus, it has a very, from a tarot perspective, an Ace of Swords kind of component to it. It's just like, bam. And very often I find that people who are intuitives professionally, psychics, mediums, have prominent Uranus placements in their chart, often in the first house. Again, I'm going to try not to digress. So epiphanies, intuition, greater understanding a fuller picture, and added to that, Uranus has this tendency to, because you get to bring you closer to yourself and make you more authentic, and therefore liberate you and free you from all sorts of shackles, free us from all sorts of shackles. It's not a planet that is necessarily comfortable in Taurus and is restrained and struggles in Taurus, because Taurus is not really interested in lightning bolts and earthquakes. Earthquakes recently, folks. I mean, Los Angeles last night, but recently there have been a few rumbles. So let's hope that it's a lightning bolt planet. And sometimes, I really love Uranus as a planet, and my experience for me personally with Uranus as a planet tends to be positive. But Uranus is associated not only with positive lightning bolts, but also negative and challenging lightning bolts. And some astrologers have looked at some of the fixed stars. There are two prevailing opinions about this new moon online. One is, oh, it's on Earth Day. Isn't the planet happy that we are somehow scaled back while giving due respect to all the tragedy that surrounds us as a result of the pandemic? But aren't there things to learn with regard to what the shelter-in-place and quarantine has done to the health of the planet? I'm looking above me right now, and the days have gone when Los Angeles was blanketed in smog. Those days are far behind us. But with the shelter-in-place, there's a height to the sky in Los Angeles that I have not seen, and a visibility, a quality of visibility that I have simply not seen in the years that I've been here. So it's undeniable. So for a certain group of people, there's something freeing and liberating and quantum healing on a global planetary level with this new moon. And the fact that it's in Taurus may produce some sort of a bomb. For other astrologers, this new moon is conjunct certain fixed stars, and sidereally, for example, from a Jyotish perspective, this new moon is not in Taurus, but still in Aries, and is in a part of Aries that is actually uncomfortable and feisty, and the fixed stars that it's conjunct are negative. So you have one group of astrologers who are looking at this as somehow positive and stabilizing and peaceful, and you have another group of astrologers who are predicting lightning bolts of a negative quality with death and destruction associated with it. I'm going to give you both of those that information, and we're going to see where it goes. Certainly with the eclipses at play, there are 3 eclipses instead of 2 coming up in June and July. One as early as June the 4th, the other on June the 20th, and then one on July the 4th. And I've already encouraged you to look at the week before and after April the 4th, and soon you're going to need to look at the week before and after May the 4th as bringing you data or information related to these eclipses. So, and eclipses, as I've mentioned before on this channel, can often herald and portend people transitioning, dying, death, and increase, and we're seeing that play out. I don't think I need to hammer that. So with all the negativity at play, what does this new moon mean to me? You're on this channel, I share all this information, and ultimately you're like, all right, Avi, we're here listening to you, so what does it mean to you? To me, if I were to keep it simple, and I will, and I find that keeping astrology literal tends to be far more predictively accurate than getting overly complicated and looking at every single, apart from the major things. For me, on a personal level, pay attention to, look at where Taurus is in your chart and what house it occupies. If you have access to your chart and you know your birth time and can look at it online and get a sense of this kind of stuff, look at where Taurus is in your chart, see what house it occupies, see what that house stands for, and over the next 4 weeks, it's possible that, and it's more than possible, that area of your chart is going to somehow be more important than normal in your life. Over the next 72 hours, see if subtle but unmistakable things are brought to you related to that aspect of your chart. So if the new moon is in the house of career, you might get a phone call. You might get something related to career related. There might be a development. You might find that you are taking certain actions that you've been wanting to take, but this new moon gives you energy. Remember, new moon, the 24, 48, 72 hours prior to new moon tend to be flat, but then after the new moon, pretty soon after the new moon, there's an energetic reset, and we get wind behind our sails to take care of certain things. So it could very well be that wherever the sign of Taurus is over the next 72 hours, there's subtle but unmistakable new beginnings of some sort. Things brought to you. You start to take care of certain things that have been on your to-do list, but you haven't been able to get to, and all of a sudden the energy is there to take care of them. Sorry about the ambient noise if it's coming through. It is very likely and possible, pay attention to whatever it is that comes through. It's very likely and possible. I'm going to read Uranus as from a positive context in terms of accelerating forward movement in some way. And that this theme of liberation on a personal, epiphanies, liberation, quantum leaps. Very, very possible. Very, very possible. I'm going to keep an eye out for the negative or the challenging or the gloom and doom and destruction aspect that has been mentioned with the fixed stars. It's undeniable that the fixed stars this new moon is conjuncting are challenging and negative. But I'm neither quite as positive or Pollyanna as, oh my God, the Earth is going to have a new awakening, and I'm certainly not I'm going to put a pin on the lightning striking and the tower falling, gloom and doom and destruction. I would say unmistakable new beginnings, and look to see if wherever Taurus is in your chart, whether somehow this new moon kickstarts or continues to develop an idea of greater independence, liberation, epiphanies, quantum leaps of understanding or growth over the next 4 weeks. Especially the next couple of weeks will be important. So I'm going to look at, there's no question in my mind that from a personal level, I'm going to look at the more positive, liberating, enlightening, intuitive flashes, clarity aspects of Uranus. And that's what I'm going to be emphasizing predictively. On a global level, for me, there's a necessary next step with this new moon as far as the pandemic is concerned, and that does concern liberation in some way. Is it going to happen immediately? I don't think so. But I would, just as I had said 4 weeks ago, that it's going to be this lunar cycle where we're going to need to sit with our wounds, and the seeds of healing are going to be planted, and healing solutions, and we're going to move forward from there, however slowly, but that's where the seeds are planted. I would say that with this particular new moon is when some form of liberation, freedom comes into play to some extent over the next 4 weeks. Even ideas in terms of revolution, whatever that freedom, again, on a more global level. Sorry, I'm getting a little distracted and I don't want to do this video again. And unfortunately, they can't see me and I can't see them, so they don't know that I'm trying to do video and they can't scale back their conversation. So, sorry about that. On a global level, again, epiphanies, intuition, flashes, things being revealed, our understanding somehow just quantum leap of understanding, intuition, but liberation, independence, and maybe even planting the seeds of, in the next 4 weeks, by the time we get to the next lunar cycle, I think we will be in a place where we have a better sense or understanding over the next 4 weeks as to, are we going back into the workforce? Who is, who isn't? How is this being phased? How are we opening things up? Even if we remain closed and hunkered down into June, we'll see. I think over the next 4 weeks, things will start to open up. And you could say, well, I'll be in the headlines, Georgia, and this. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about places that are more resistant to some extent to opening up. Some seeds, something gets started. There's a greater understanding as to how to free ourselves and how to move about in some way where we're able to cope with whatever it is that is going on. But there's a larger understanding as well, and that may well be political or social in some ways, that we need to be paying attention to. Greater understanding, greater revelations, greater independence. If there is something sudden and shocking that happens that is negative, then I send prayers and blessings to us all so that we are given the strength to deal with it. But as I said, I think if you're an adventurous person, and I am an adventurous person, then a new moon conjunct Uranus is to be looked forward to. There's no denying the fixed stars that this new moon is conjunct are tricky ones. No denying that. But at the same time, I would hang my hat on the fact that healing solutions have started to appear over the last 4 weeks, and freedom, liberation, independent solutions will start to appear over the next 4 weeks. The next new moon that's in Gemini, I think at that point in time, by the time we get to the middle of May, I'll say this as well, but they'll do a separate video on this. By the time we get to the middle of May, we're going to be taking stock of where we're at financially and in terms of our resources and relationships and how we need to manage our resources and tighten our belts. I think I've already given you a heads up on this with the Venus and Gemini video, but you're welcome to look at that too. Okay, it's nice to be back. It's nice to be chatting with you. I have another couple of videos that I definitely have on mind that I need to do, so I will get on those in the next few days. Please feel free to share this video if you found it useful. Comment on it if you choose to like it. Likes and comments tend to give the video more circulation on its own on YouTube. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, please, if you are so inclined. And if you click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button and you select all, then you'll be notified whenever it is that I do new videos, or you can customize when you need to be when you'd like to be notified as well. And my contact information is going to be in the description area below, so you can use that to contact me if you're interested in a personal reading, or you'd like me to make an easy to read version of your birth chart. You'll need to know your birth time for that. Then that'll tell you which signs are in which houses and what those houses stand for. But as I said, you will need to know your birth time for that. Okay. Over and out. Enjoy this new moon and take it as a call to action. Take it as a call to action. In this time, you will have some energy. It's a reset of a new moon, and we need a bit of a reset of a new moon. Okay, more soon.